So I like to tell stories. Over the years, I'd have many opportunities to tell lots of stories in lots of different ways to lots of different people. From imagining the future when we created Wired, to helping visitors find the Mona Lisa at the Louvre, to helping TED share its big ideas and questions. We handed out the premiere issue of Wired at TED in 1993, and we're pretty sure that getting it into the hands of TED's early adopters helped. Yep, but even everybody didn't love us, and not everyone was a fan. All good stories, but today, I'd like to tell you a different story. I was born and raised in Montana. I now live and work in Park City, Utah. But lately, I've been spending a lot of time driving north. This is one of my favorite signs, on the road. And I know I'm getting closer to my destination when I pass this sign. It both horrified and thrilled my husband and partner, John. He grew up in the South. My destination the last couple of years has been Great Falls. I was born in Great Falls, just a raw-boned prairie town, my mother called it. As kids, we used to know when we were almost home when we saw the stack. At 508 feet high, it was a great, great landmark, until it had to be torn down in 1982. But that's another story. Here's another Great Falls landmark that's also sadly gone now. But this sign's still here. And as a designer, it's still one of my favorite signs, the 3D Supper Club. 3D, it stands for drinking, dining, and dancing. Words to live by, don't you think? But what I want to talk about today is the best thing in Park City. No, it's not in Park City, it's in Great Falls. This is the house my father designed at 1917 Cherry Drive. And because of my father, I always loved architecture and design, and some of his other favorite things too, like wood, rocks, and especially cats. This is Pearl. She's inspecting a model of the 4 homes that John and I have been working on the last several years. They're all in Park City's historic district. They all have wood frames. They all were miner shacks, and were all built into the hillside without foundations about 100 years ago. And here they are in the 1980s, still without their foundations. And here's what the street looked like last year. As designers, our goal has been to rebuild these little houses for the next century, with modern interiors and floor plans, while preserving the historic facades and their relationship to the street. This is what the Blue House looked like in the 1920s. And this is what it looked like in 2007. We almost lost it while moving onto its new foundation. So there's another good story, but not for today. Now, I can talk about designing and building small houses, or about the pros and cons of historic restoration, but not today. It could be reservation too. These days I've been thinking about 1917 Cherry Drive. My father was an architect. He graduated from here at Montana State University in 1948 and moved to Great Falls in 1952 to start his own architectural firm. This is a photo collage of those school years, surrounded by beautiful women, I might add. In 1955, Bill designed this house. He and my mother, Harriet, built it. They've lived in this house for over half a century. And as an architect, my dad continued to experiment, design, redesign, rebuild all parts of this house over the decades. This is one of his favorite tools. It's one of the oldest and scariest circular saws you will ever see. One I refuse to learn how to operate. Okay, so here's one of my first lessons about wood details. Always stack the wood properly, very properly. And you should always keep the wood scraps, whether outside at home or in a storage space you've had for 35 years, Then your daughter can discover the beautiful wood, the clear cedar, the mahogany, the hemlock, and the walnut, all very neatly stacked. She'll also discover that the blue bentwood chairs in the house came from Vienna, Austria, and ended up in the Pennant Bar in Great Falls. And then they were salvaged and painted blue by Bill and Harriet. I grew up in this house. I learned to get along with my brother and sister here. I learned to ride a bike here. I learned to lean on my big sister Peggy. That's her there on the right. She's at the University of Montana now, dean of the School of Journalism, but she's still listening to and editing my stories. I got married here. Here's that same spot in 2009, 20 years later. It's right around this time I learned why I was so comfortable in Japan. This is a Buddhist temple in Tokyo that's 500 years old. I think there's a lot in common between this temple in Japan and my parents' house in Great Falls, Montana. They both blur the lines between the interior and the exterior, inside and out. There's Japan. There's Japan. Great Falls. Great Falls. But what I've been thinking about lately is that design is not so much about one detail or another. It's more about the stories we tell ourselves. I think my dad's best stories are told in his rocks. He was a mountain climber. He taught me how to climb. And he taught me that rocks have stories, and to bring them home and label them so you remember the stories. So you remember those stories. And you bring them home, and you put them in a bowl, or you put them in another bowl, or you put them outside in the garden, so that whether you remember it or not, there's a good story behind each one of those rocks. And finally, there's all our cats. Over the years, they have their stories too. For one thing, they always know the best parts of the house. Whether it's outside in the raspberry patch or just inside at that magical edge between inside and out where the sunshine warms the floor. Animals, though, seem to know when our stories get tougher. I think they help when the inside to outside edges of our minds get blurred. You see, these days, my father's been struggling with memory loss. He struggles to control his mind, and he control his home. And it's scary for him, and it's scary for me. And this is what he and I see at home now, an old place that needs maintenance, and it's full of 1,000 things that need to be filed. But this is what our cats see, not design or architecture or years of concentrated thinking and then forgetting. They just see a place for living their lives and loving their friends. Maybe these animals know more about design than we do. They seem to know who and what design is really for, despite all the stories we humans tell ourselves every day. Thanks for listening to my stories.